This video is sponsored by the Arc Echoes of Arcadia Light RP. Now, one of the things I very distinctly remember about old 2015 Arc is actually the Raptors, and obviously the old Raptor model, now being replaced by a much better one, although the old one still has a very special place in my heart, and you know, I do somewhat enjoy looking back at that model today, and who knows, it may even make the thumbnail because, you know, I have access to the old models, but I'm not sure if it will actually load in. Either way, the Raptor was just one of those creatures where actually I got a significant amount of them killed. They were just, for some reason, for me, some of the easiest creatures to kill, and I don't know why, but I eventually, at some point, probably tamed a high enough level Raptor, because levels back then, no one really cared too much. I wasn't one of those people, and I got like just whatever. You just go for whatever creature was there. But they were just really fun to ride around on, and you kind of felt like you really achieved something when you got your first Raptor. You were like, yes, I've finally done it. And then when they get killed, it's just like some of the saddest moments you could ever experience in Arc. But then you get another one, and then you're up and running again. And obviously they didn't have the pounce ability back then, but they still were actually a really fast tame, and actually probably one of the fastest in the game. Because I'm pretty sure the Gallimimus was a 2016 thing, not a 2015 thing. So obviously the Raptor just had to be here. It is also just one of the most nostalgic Arc tames as well, and even to this day it is a really well worthwhile creature. Next up, we got the Ichthyosaurus, and I had to put this thing here. Like, this was probably my first ocean creature that I ever really did, apart from the Megalodon. The Megalodon was first. I pretty much remember when the oceans was just Megalodons, and now there are so many other creatures like electric eels and all of that, and it's a whole mess now. Not really a mess, but I kind of preferred it back then when it was a lot simpler, but also I do like it now with all the other creatures. It was quite a barren environment, lacking in a lot of things, but this is just such a great introduction creature, and the way it was tamed was very new to me, being a passive tame. It's the first passive tame I ever really experienced in Arc. Not sure if it was the first ever passive tame introduced into the game, but it was just one of those things where I just like, this is such a cool new feature. I simply had to include this thing in on the list just for that thing alone, really, as that was just such a big standout, and features that just seem so normal today were just so big back then, and now probably no one thinks about, oh, it's a passive tame or it's a knockout tame, and there's loads of other different tame methods, but back then it was a really big deal. Now, as I stated earlier, this video is sponsored by the Arc Echoes of Arcadia Light RP, and I'm really thankful for them reaching out for me, but I want to tell you why this is the best Arc server out there. It is the most immersive RP server by far. I love all of the time that I spent with it, and so far I've thoroughly enjoyed all the playthrough, and that is due to daily and weekly large events. So you get an event daily, but you get a weekly large event. On top of that, there's 9 GB of DLC full conversion, which just adds a whole new way to play. There's a fresh wipe at the moment as well, so if you want to get started, you really can do well. There's over 60 mods, over 75 new creatures, there's all the DLC creatures there, it's on the center. You are going to have the best time on this map, and there's even 12 unique basic classes, and with a server like this with 100% uptime, there's really nothing that can go wrong. So scan the QR code on screen, or there'll be a link in the description to join the server right away. Next up, we got the Megalodon, and I was already talking about this, but I have to talk about it, because the Megalodon, as a child, I always really liked sharks, and the Megalodon was just my perfect further window into it, I guess you could call it, as at the time, and still to this day actually, I was really into sharks, and I was so excited to get a Megalodon. Like, when I spawned in to my first map on the island, I was just like, I need to get a Megalodon. The Megalodon is the first thing that I ever need to get, and it just, thinking back to my first ever Megalodon tame, obviously named it Bruce after the shark that was called Jaws, but it was called Bruce. It was in the film Jaws. There we go. Corrected my statement. Now, actually, my latest Megalodon is called Megan. Megan the Megalodon. Do you think that's a good name for a Megalodon? Yes or no? It just, for me, there's just so much nostalgia around this creature, and keeping it real today with Megan the Megalodon, it's only a level 16. It's not great, but we don't talk about it. It's pink Megan the Megalodon. In at number 7 is the Mosasaur, and I promise this is the last aquatic creature on the list, at least fully aquatic. There is one semi-aquatic creature further ahead on the list. If you can guess that, comment it down below and comment down the time pin of when you think you guessed what that creature is. But the reason why I'm putting the Mosasaur in at this spot is it was just seen as such a powerful creature, and it still kind of is to this day. Somewhat it has been diminished in its perceived power because there are just so many other creatures out there which are really deadly, but having a creature at this size with this scale, like things like the Elite 60s and all of that, I'm pretty sure didn't exist. If I briefly just check through the catalogs, yeah, the Elite 60s wasn't here. If you couldn't tell, I do have a list of all the 2015 creatures, because there's no way I could remember all of those, and the Elite 60s wasn't really there yet, and this was pretty much the biggest tame out there in 2015, and the scale of it really made it a huge change to tame, but a very enjoyable one. Next up, we got the Caro, and before you say that the Allosaurus is better and all of that, personally, I'm not really an Allo lover myself. The Allosaurus did not exist back in 2015. I will list all the creatures beginning with A right now. There was the Alpha Caro, the Alpha Raptor, the Alpha T-Rex, the Anglerfish, the Anki, the Aranio, and the Argentavis. And that is all of the A creatures. The Allo just simply didn't exist, and I'm not actually sure when it was added. It may have been 2016. Probably was 2016, to be honest. But back in 2015, that thing didn't exist, and this is obviously why I have more of a love for the Caro. It is a much more nostalgic tame for me, and it felt like it really did fit in with its comedically small arms and also the horns coming out of its head. And obviously back then it didn't do the bleed ability, but it has somewhat leveled up over time, and actually did have a retexturing at some point, if you do remember that. The Allo textures did change around. So they used to be kind of, I don't know, you could say they looked either a bit more slimy or a bit less slimy, and that's the only way I can really describe it. Look at some like really old 2015 Caros and you might see what I mean, if the video quality is actually good enough, because most of the videos uploaded back then were not in particularly high resolution. But either way, the Caro always has a very special place in my heart, and I couldn't leave it out of the best 2015 creatures list. In at number 5 we have the Rex, and most people know that I generally kind of prefer the Caro from the Rex, but I'm sort of generalizing my opinions a little bit with this creature, as the Rex was just one of those tames which was so highly respected, and again has gone through a model change. I do again prefer the newer one, but the old one, nostalgia, you know, although the old one kind of really does look goofy, and with the kind of UI and sort of graphics update you can kind of call it, I think that was in like 2018, 2017. Either way, around that time there was it must have been 2017, was it? Yeah, 2017, 2018, either way, there was a kind of graphics UI update, and yeah, then the graphics changed, and I'm pretty sure that's when a lot of the models were updated. And yes, this Rex model fits a lot more with the newer graphics, but if you chuck this one into the 2015 art game, it might look a little bit out of place again with like RG models, or like the old RG models, the old Spino models and all of that. Some of the models have just stayed the same, actually. The Giga's a good example for that. But, like, you know, there's something about the old model Rex that somehow I prefer it a little bit from the new one. I'm not saying that the old one is better, because it definitely isn't, but it kind of goes most of them. Nostalgia is just the way. And actually, back then, and still to this day, it was kind of the creature which you'd be like, oh, I'm going to defeat the Broodmother. The Broodmother didn't have an arena back then, and it did exist, the Gamma, Beta and Alpha, and it was the only boss there, and it was even tameable actually really early on until the developers patched it. And yeah, the Rex was just your kind of go-to option really for that. Next up we got the Spinosaurus, and did you guess that? Semi-aquatic creature, or at least you should have, by 826. And this is just, I don't know what it is. The Rex and the Spino have seemingly swapped places as of today, and it just seems like the Rex really gets a lot more respect than it deserves. And I know it's kind of like well, the Rex is a really useful creature, and I do admit that. But back then, the Spino was always pretty much seen as the higher creature, at least from my view. It was just seen as the bigger carnivore, the beefier carnivore, and it was seen as rarer as well, and a nicer creature to tame, really, especially due to its abilities in the water, as it was seen as such a versatile creature. And obviously, it has gone through a model change, if you didn't know already, even though, in my opinion, the models do look kind of quite similar. There is definitely an upgrade, but if you compare the old to the new Rex models, there's a much bigger difference there, and especially with the old to new RG models, that's probably one of the biggest differences in model changes. I'm so glad Wildcard did that, even though the old RG models really do invoke a lot of nostalgia in me. And again, with the TLCs, that did add things like the hydration buff. I'm pretty sure it didn't have the hydration buff back then. And obviously then it can stand up on its hind legs now and all of that. But the mobility was definitely still there. Not sure if it has an oxygen. If I'm remembering this correctly, it didn't used to have an oxygen stat, and now it does. But it's a very minor one. It depletes really slowly, or it's the other way around. Honestly, I haven't actually used the Spino Auto recently or paid attention to it. So actually, leave a comment down below. Does the Spino have oxygen now, or did it have oxygen back then and it doesn't now? It's one of those, but I'm not really quite sure on which one. In at number 3, we've got the Quetz, and I had to put this thing here. Okay, when flyer speed leveling was still a thing, without it just being a setting and just being absolutely everywhere, you could get a Quetzal and crank the movement on it and have a thing like this, which could jet across the map, whereas now these things are ridiculously slow, and I wouldn't put it in the best creatures, but obviously we are very creature limited here, and a lot of my favourite art creatures just didn't exist for even over 5 years at this point. It's actually crazy how long Arc has been around for. Either way, it's almost like GTA 5, GTA 5, GTA 6 divides even longer. Either way, slightly irrelevant point. The Quetzal was just such a fast, versatile creature, and with that platform saddle too, it really did play a huge benefit to my Arc progress. And although the RG was a great metal run creature, once I got a Quetzal, which I did solo first time, absolute pain, would not recommend it, especially back then. I always use this thing for my metal runs. In at number 2, we have the RG, and obviously I was just speaking about the RG and talking about how I didn't really use it for metal runs as much as the Quetzal back in the day, but I really can't discount this, and this was my favourite other flyer. And you might think, why am I not putting the Pteranodon on this list? And although the Pteranodon, I could say, is a very nostalgic tame for me, I didn't really enjoy it all too much compared to the RG, as yes, it could fly really fast, but with that terrible weight stat, it always kept annoying me so much. And when I had an RG, it was just so much better that I didn't care anymore about the Pteranodon. Almost forgot about that thing's name entirely. And obviously you could use it with an Anki as well, although I don't think it could auto farm metal, and then you could just get loads of metal. And I'm pretty sure I had weight reduction back then, although that might have been in the TLC, and actually realistically it probably didn't have weight reduction, and I don't think it had a smithy in its saddle yet, and I'm not sure about that regen buff either. A lot of things that you now take for granted in creatures have come in TLCs. It's a wonder why some creatures actually haven't got TLCs yet, as there are some art creatures which are some of the most useless things, but were actually tamed back in the days of 2015, 2016, and 2017, because they were cool new things. The Dimetrodon's a good example, I guess. And although it has a pretty decent use, you could say, what it was trying to do is a useful thing. Air conditioners are just much better. But either way, RG in at number 2. And in at number 1, it's the Giga. And actually, when researching for this video, I never realised the Giga actually came out in 2015, and I always thought it was a 2016 tame. But no, it did actually come out in 2015, which is slightly surprising to me. Again, I always thought it was a 2016 tame, but I had to put it right in the number 1 spot as soon as I actually learnt for real that this thing came out in 2015, and that's really insane to think about. And that's obviously why it had the rage meter and all of that, because it was so much more powerful than every creature which had come before, and nothing like the Titanosaur, I'm pretty sure, had been released. If I recheck, yeah, Titanosaur's not on it. We only had creatures beginning with T. We only had was a Titanoboa, Titanomira, the other Titanomira, the flying ones, the soldier, the trike, and the trilobite. I don't know why there's 3 Titanomiras there. There should be just the drone and the soldier. Either way, nothing like the Titanosaur. This was the biggest hot creature in the game, and even with the Alpha T-Rex, like, yes, that was a big tame. This was bigger and better, and it just dealt so much damage, and you felt like the absolute king of the world once taming it, and obviously naming it Tiny Tim was the best option you had. So that is why I have put the Giga in at number 1, and you know, for 2015 it is insane to think that this creature actually released. It's still kind of messing with my mind a bit. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I hope that you enjoyed it. And as always, comment down below, what was your best art creature of 2015, and do you agree with this list? And with that, I will see you all later.